Welcome back to your favorite podcast, Deac2Deac. In this episode, I had a chance to sit down with former women's tennis player Ashlee Davis Brooks. Ashlee and I talked about her career as a trailblazer, being the first African-American women's tennis player in Wake Forest program, her storied career, what she's doing now, plus much, much more. Take a listen. Don't forget to subscribe. And as always, go Deacs.
So Ashlee, how's it been?
Everything's good. It's been super busy since the last time I saw you, but super blessed over here, so can't complain.
So welcome to Deac2Deac and Deacon Nation. They already know you from being a great tennis player at Wake. So since it's your first time on, let's back up a little bit and give Deacon Nation sort of your background. Talk about where you're from and what it was like growing up.
Yeah, so I'm from Indiana. I'm a Hoosier. I grew up right outside of Indianapolis in a small town called Anderson, Indiana. So really, I'm from the real A. But yeah, I came from a wonderful family. My parents are actually have grown up in the Midwest pretty much their entire lives. My mom is actually from the South. And grew up with my sister and most of my family in Indiana. And yeah, up until I was 18, that's how I was born and raised.
So what was it like for you growing up in the Midwest, and how did you get into tennis?
Yeah, so I really fell into tennis by chance. I come from a family of like my dad was an athlete, my sister was an athlete. So I grew up around sports. And so I think it was really natural for me to be very active at a young age. I was in tennis, basketball, dance. I did a little bit of everything. And my godfather actually purchased me a tennis racket for my birthday when I was like 4 years old. And so that is what introduced me to tennis. I think my parents were like, oh, I mean, let's try this out. Let's see what happens, if we put her in this activity. So it was really interesting how I fell into tennis. Anderson is a pretty small town at that point in time. The automotive industry was booming. And so both of my parents actually were like, they retired from GM. So Anderson at the time, although it was pretty small, it was a really great city to live in. We had, at this point, we have like one public high school, but we had multiple public high schools then. And, it was pretty interesting for me growing up. I think I grew up differently than a lot of like my family, like a lot of like, I grew up, I had a really interesting childhood, I would say, but it was good. I mean, my parents did amazing. I had a lot of love and support around me. So yeah.
Well, growing up, and you talked about getting that first tennis racket.
Mm-hmm.
How did you get to a point where you made the decision that this is the route you wanted to go versus other sports or other lanes that you could have went in? What was it about tennis that made you decide that this is it? I'm going to stick this one out.
Yeah, it's really funny. When I started playing, I was absolutely terrible. And so my first coach, her name is Sue. God bless her. She's so sweet. But she always would say, tell my parents, she's told this story so many times at this point, but she would tell my parents, like, just be patient. Because I was absolutely terrible, Kevin. Like, I was one of the worst kids on the court. And I remember that. And me being a competitive kid, I think from like the womb, that was like, it didn't feel good. But for some reason, my parents kept me in the sport. And so by the time I got, I played all through elementary school. Even though I was bad, I was a late bloomer. By the time I got to middle school, I was starting to get a little bit better. But I was like, my two main sports at that point were basketball and tennis. And my parents saw some potential in me. There were some coaches that started to see some potential in me. And then my parents, when I was right before I went to high school, were like, you're pretty good at two sports, but we really want you to focus on one. So which one is it going to be? And me being me, I like to oftentimes go down the road less traveled. My dad had played basketball, my sis played basketball. So I was like, bet, like, I'll play tennis. Really with no idea on like what direction tennis was going to take me in. But I knew being a hard worker that I would be really dedicated to it and put my all into it. And so when I was about like 13, 14, that's when I decided like, I'm going to go all in on tennis. And I really was just blessed enough to have, tennis is a really expensive sport. It's similar to golf. It's not a team sport. It's really hard to get sponsorships and, get like extra funding. And, I mean, all the travel, clothes, the rackets, the strings, all the equipment's really expensive. And I was really blessed enough to have two parents who were like, awesome, like we'll dedicate our resources to getting you the coaching that you need. And as long as you put in 100%, like we'll meet you there and put in 100% as well. And that basically about 13, 14 really started like my period in my life where I put my all into tennis. And I was like, okay, let's see how far I can take this.
Well, you had a lot of great success. You talked about how you started, and I don't know any athlete that was just that gifted when they started. I'm still hoping that there's no film around of me when I was 19 years old trying to play football. That would be ugly. So, but you progressed very quickly. I mean, you won multiple state championships. I mean, being nationally ranked. I mean, you playing across the country. Did you see that much success coming, that early in your life and in a game that, was not quite where it is now in terms of popularity, particularly in the Black community? So what was it that you feel like propelled you in having so much success so early?
Yeah, it's interesting that you say it was quick because to me, it felt very slow. I just remember being on the court and getting like my butt kicked a lot. I mean, I lost a lot. I was in tournaments losing first round. And it was really interesting being always the only Black, kid on the court. It was really interesting because I felt like, everyone was really nice when they were like kicking my butt when I was just playing, some of those local tournaments just in the city of Anderson. And then I started getting out to Indianapolis. And then as my mom and dad really took time to study the game, and they actually like, there were coaches that were like, she's good. Like she can be good. Like I had the power, I had the height, I had the will, I had the grit. I just needed some coaching, and I needed to be around kids that were actually like, playing at higher levels. My parents really studied the game. And once that happened and I started getting some exposure to some of these national tournaments, that's when my parents were like, okay, like what she needs to get to the next level is not going to be in Indiana. And so, I didn't know how far I could go. It's like, you don't know what you don't know, right? Until you get exposed to like other kids that are playing at heights that you didn't even know were possible. And so as I started getting better, and started winning, some of those relationships, it was like, the kid, nobody wants the only Black kid on the court to beat their kids. Let's just be honest. Like that is not popular.
Well,
So
you disappointed
as
a
a
lot
kid,
of people.
really. And I was like, it was like the kids that were killing me, like beating up on me before I started actually competing with them and then beating them. And so my first like national tournament, my mom took me to Florida, and we met another Black family, and which, you see a Black family at the tennis tournament, you like, what's up? Like, we
all of a sudden everybody cousins that you just met 10 minutes ago.
We family at this point. And so that family actually told my mom about a coach, a Black coach in Atlanta, Georgia, who had been coaching all of these top players. And that really started, like, I had a really amazing personal coach in Indiana. But then when I got when my parents became aware of this amazing coach, Coach Ernie Peterson, who has passed away, but is like a huge staple in my life. My mom talked to him and built some relationships. And once I started training in Atlanta at like 14, it was over.
Wow.
It was over.
So you've gone from getting your first racket to getting your butt kicked. And now you're with one of the best coaches, and you're starting to be playing at the national level.
Yep.
So at what point did you know I could play at the college level? Well, not just at the college level, but that you could play at the highest level and compete and be one of the best. When was that moment for you?
I think it came around my freshman year, maybe leading into my sophomore year. I remember the first time I went down to Atlanta. So at that point, I had already been like playing with a lot of the boys in Indiana. So I was coming up, like I was playing in age groups that were like older age groups. And so I was starting to get that experience. I was really starting to like hone my craft. The first time I went to Atlanta and played with Coach Peterson, I had never played. Was playing like 8 hours a day. I had never done that in my life. I had calluses, open calluses on my hands. I was playing so much. I had to get what's called new skin. I'm sure you know what new skin is. And,
You're gonna have to explain new skin
tape
to
my
me.
little wounds up. New skin is like it looks like a nail polish, right? But you like literally paint like new skin on top of your open wounds.
No, we just got Band-Aids, move it up 10 yards, keep the practice going. So this new skin, this is new to me. I'm gonna have to check in. I'm gonna have to look into this because I got some bunions.
Like still, yeah, like new skin. I had never heard of new skin, but I had open wounds on my hands, and I was like, "Yo, like this is why I've never hit this many tennis balls in my life." And my mom was like, "Do you want to come home or are you good?" And at first I was like, "Man, I'm trying to go home. Like, y'all got me running. Like, I'm playing 8 hours a day. This is in Atlanta in the summertime." Yeah. But you know what? I loved it. Like, I love a good grind. And so I weathered the storm, and 8 hours a day became my new normal in the summertime. I spent that whole summer in Atlanta playing with some of the top kids in the country. Like, some of these people are, one is Serena's hitting partner right now. One of them used to be Naomi Osaka's head coach. Like, these are people that are still doing really great in the game. And so after I spent a summer with them, I went back out and was playing more national tournaments, and I started winning. And I was like, I'm in there. Yeah. like I'm in here. So that really boosted my confidence and really changed my game.
So you had a lot of offers coming out of high school. Again, as I mentioned, you have won multiple state championships, national tournaments. You're getting exposure. What was it about Wake Forest that separated it from the other schools and opportunities that you had?
It's really interesting because, like, if I think about myself today, I'm like, I wonder if I would have felt the same about Wake Forest. But at that point in time, I even just got exposed to Wake Forest because one of the other top players in the country, who I had lost to in the state finals my freshman year, ended up going to Wake Forest. Oh, wow. And so that's how I got exposed to Wake in general. I knew that I always wanted to play either in the Pac-10 or the ACC. And so by the time I started becoming really good my freshman year, I was already starting to get letters. And so it was like, it kind of became a norm to me where I was like, oh, like, wow, like I can actually, I think I can start to choose like what college I go to if I just keep getting exposure and keep playing. And so I actually canceled my recruiting trip to UNC, but I ended up doing Wake Forest, University of Tennessee, University of Texas, and Georgia Tech were my recruiting trips. And like, you know how they do, like they lay out the red carpet.
I got a question. I got a request. Could you say that one more time? What school did you turn down again? Just say that one more time so Deacon Nation can hear it.
I canceled my UNC trip.
There you go. I thought it was right. I want to make sure my audio picked that up. Go ahead.
Canceled UNC. And so I did all the other recruiting trips. I think Wake Forest was my second to last one. I think I actually went to Texas last. And every recruiting trip, I was like calling home. I was like, I'm going to UT. Like, I'm going to Texas. I'm going to Georgia Tech. And what was really special about it was I actually went at that time to the two universities that had completely separate women's programs, which was University of Tennessee and University of Texas, which was like, it's still an anomaly at this point. I saw at Wake Forest, like Wake's women's basketball has their own workout section, own gym, and that's beautiful. They were doing that at University of Tennessee and Texas at that time. And the last recruiting trip that I went on, which was University of Texas, I remember the head coach, I was getting on the plane and he did the hook 'em sign, right? Like, and I was like, I'm going to Texas. Like, this is my school. We also shared a birthday. And so I came home and I was like, I know I said I'm going to Tennessee and Georgia Tech, and Texas and Wake Forest, but I think I'm really like, I think this is it. And my parents were like, are you sure? Because I grew up in a small town. I did not go to a huge high school. Academics was really important to me. And also Wake's tennis team was like 2 in the country at that point. And so I was about to call Texas. My parents were like, let's think about this one more time. They presented the facts to me about Wake Forest, and it really got me realigned to like what I really wanted and what I was accustomed to and what space I felt like I could be more, successful in. And so I changed at the last minute and I was like, I'm gonna be a Demon Deacon. And that was it.
That's awesome. So
Yeah.
you came to Wake and you made an immediate impact. I mean, ACC, All-ACC, freshman of the year.
Mm-hmm.
Did you have any kind of help making that adjustment between high school and college? Because again, you came into a program, it was ranked high at the time. But also, I mean, it's your first year, and that could be a very difficult year for a student athlete to come into, and you have to get adjusted to so many things. What were some of the resources, or who were some of the people that helped you become so acclimated that you were able to excel on the court and off the court?
It was, I think from a athletic standpoint, I felt really prepared. I had been playing up a lot over the last 4 years, and I've always been someone that can like rise to the occasion when I need to. And so from a tennis perspective, as an athlete, I felt very prepared. From an academic perspective, that was a very hard transition for me. I had been used to being away from home because I traveled a lot anyway. And although my parents traveled with me most of the time, I also traveled a lot by myself with teams and like other coaches and things. So that was not hard for me. I actually was like, can't wait to get out the house. But that first semester, Kevin, was really tough academically. And first of all, I think I was taking like 16 hours. Like I was taking too many hours. Tennis is pretty much an all year round sport. And so although your true season is in the spring, we have a fall season, which is full of tournaments. And so I was doing that. Plus I was taking too many classes, and I had a unsuccessful, to say the least, first semester academically. And that was really hard because I am naturally a high achiever. I work hard. I had always been a good student, but then I get to Wake and I'm like, I don't know if I'm smart enough to be here. And I also wanted to, because of that, I wanted to transfer because my confidence was like, I was like, I'm about to fail out of school and then I'm going to be a loser and then go home and everyone's going to talk about me. And I'm going to disappoint everyone because all this hype has been like created around this little Black girl from Anderson being able to like be successful. Dwight Lewis will always like, y'all can't say nothing bad about Dwight. Okay. Dwight can do no wrong in my book because Dwight is the person that like, let me know I can do this. Like I belong here, not just as an athlete, like academically, I'm intelligent enough to be here. Like I'm supposed to be here. And I don't know, truly without Dwight, I don't know that I would have stayed at Wake.
That's awesome. Shout out to Dwight Lewis. He's been around for, I think he just finished his 20th year recently. And so he's been, a big help. And there are a lot of student athletes. There are a lot of students that, owe Dwight a lot because he's helped them get through and has been that person. And so after your freshman year, what were some of the things you felt started to evolve with the game of tennis? And to kind of give you what I'm talking about, when I first started at Wake, the size of the athletes changed drastically in the game of football. The athletic ability became better. So when you look back at the game of tennis in your time at Wake from your freshman year to your last year, did the game of tennis evolve and change that much during that time?
I think, over time, I think even out of college, we've seen that women are bringing more power to the game. Like we're just getting stronger. And I felt like my game and my strength got stronger at Wake Forest. I mean, just from the sheer amount of workouts. I mean, we was powerlifting in the gym. I just started doing CrossFit actually. And I'm like, this is taking me back to my days at Wake Forest. But I think, men typically in the tennis game, men have been seen as the powerful, like they're the power players, and women tend to be more strategic and like, we could slice and dice the ball, but I think early on in the game, like power just was not associated with women's tennis. And then you get to the college level and then you start to get into the pro, like you're in the pros and like people are out here, like it's power, speed, like endurance and all the above. And the power is sustainable. And so that's what I felt like. I felt like at the junior level, you would see that the further along you got into the tournaments. And then I got to college and it's like, it doesn't matter where you're playing in the lineup. And especially if you're like top 3 in the lineup, like everybody's freaking good and everybody can hit the ball. Now, what else can you do? Mentally, are you there? Is the power sustainable? And do you have the strategy along with the power? And if you don't, like you're not going to survive.
Yeah, that's something I'm noticing as I have these conversations with student athletes of all generations in different sports. They say the same thing. It becomes more mental and consistency. Those two things become the deciding factor in, going from, like being like everybody else to really being great. It's a combination of things. And so I want to talk about, the other history that you were able to make at Wake Forest during that time. Did you know that you were the first African American female ever in tennis at Wake Forest?
I did. I definitely knew that. I just don't think I knew. I think even today I'm kind of like, oh, like I was the first black woman to play tennis there. But I was always the first, like I was the first black woman
Okay.
to win a state championship in Indiana and then do it multiple times. Like I had always been the only in the first in a lot of things. And so I was just like, yeah, like it's Wednesday. like
But at
like,
this,
like this is just another thing.
but what was interesting is having played for Coach Jim Caldwell, first African American head coach in the ACC with football. That seemed to be his approach, which was, yes, you recognize it, you understand it, but you still have a job to do. You still want to go out and be successful. Same thing with head women's basketball coach Charlene Curtis, again at Wake Forest, and that seemed to be her approach as well. But do you understand that future generations of tennis players, men and women, are going to be able to look back at your legacy and be impacted by it? How does that feel?
I think I'm still trying to process that. The older I get and the more I'm aware of history,
Mhm.
and what's going on around the world, I start to understand that. And so when you put it like that in terms of like a legacy and like other people will look at me and say, this is the like hopefully, she paved the way. That feels really great because I've always wanted to be able to make an impact in some way. I'm really glad when I was at Wake Forest that I didn't understand the impact of it because again, I
Mm.
have to get out there and do a job. And I can't be like, my brain can't be clouded by some of these other things and feeling like maybe there's a potential target on my back because I am like the first or like a lot of times the only.
Yeah. And as I got more into the history of Wake Forest athletics, I started noticing there were a lot of firsts. And Charlie Davis, first African American to be ACC Player of the Year in basketball. Bob Grant, Butch Henry, first African Americans to integrate intercollegiate athletics in the South. And your name is mentioned in that. And I also want to ask you about Serena Williams. She recently announced her retirement, but I'm hoping we can get her back to play some more. What impact did her journey have on you as you progressed through high school, college, and then playing after college?
Representation matters. As I'm in the workplace now, truly one of the toughest parts of my career has been being the only, most of my career in leadership roles or just whatever workspace I'm in. And it's tough because there's a lack of representation. Seeing Serena and Venus, like that is a reminder when you see someone that looks like you who is excelling, that's a reminder that like, oh, I can do this. Like I'm supposed to be here. Right. And when you don't see the lack of representation and why a lot of times being the only is great, but it can also take a mental toll on you. is because you're wondering and questioning yourself all the time. Like, I don't see anybody, or if I do see anybody, I hardly see anyone that's excelling. And so then you start to question your own abilities, your own worthiness. So Serena is everything to sports, but particularly, to tennis in a game where like now we're seeing more Black tennis players balling. And I just I get goosebumps like just talking about it now, because she's like really paved the way. So super influential in my life. I needed to see her to make myself believe that I can also be successful in the sport too.
That is so awesome. So during your career at Wake, what was the match that stood out as the one you just cannot forget, the one that just sits in your mind?
Yeah, oh my gosh, there's so many. There's two. Sorry, I know you said one, but there's two. So one is 2005. We are playing Duke at Wake. Duke is ranked, I think, top 10, top 15 in the country. And we lit it up. We beat them like 6-1. And I remember personally, like, I remember losing the doubles match. And so in tennis, you've got 3 doubles matches, and you need to win 2 of the 3 matches to get 1 point. And so that 1 point is a momentum starter, right? If you're down 1 point, the momentum's low. If you're up 1 point, you only need 3 more singles matches to win. And I remember we won the doubles point, but me and my partner and I lost. And I was like, I was pissed. Like, I'm one of those people, when I get on the court, I would listen to T.I. stand up before every match on the court. So I'm like, I'm ready to fight.
Hurt somebody.
I'm trying to hurt somebody.
Forget the
like
technique.
I'm going for blood. I'm going for blood. I remember that very vividly. And we came back and we beat them 6-1. That was the only point that they won, and they were ranked ahead of us. And anytime you're in a conference match, specifically UNC and Duke, like, it's going down. So that was super memorable. The other one is we went to Illinois, and it was actually the same weekend that men's basketball, when they were ranked #1, was playing Illinois. And so it was already like super excited. We got one women's team, one men's team up in Illinois. Illinois for tennis is wild. And so the crowd was super hyped. Like, the energy is electric. And like, for me, don't get a crowd in front of me telling me I can't do something. Like, I'm like, bet. So I really fed off of the crowd. It was amazing. We won 2 most memorable matches for sure.
That's awesome. So when you finished at Wake, you continued to play on some tours, right? And did some coaching?
Mm-hmm. I did. So actually my senior year of college, I tore my rotator cuff the fall season. So I had a decision to make on if I wanted to continue to play out that year, or if I wanted to sit out and redshirt. And if I'm honest, I was pretty tired at that point of like, if there was some politics going on the team, and I was really tired. And so I decided to play out my senior year, which was, it's tough. Like, I was not at my best. I did the best I could with a torn rotator cuff, still made it to NCAAs, but like, could have done better had I been healthy. Yeah. So I took that summer off after I graduated, came home, had surgery, moved back to Charlotte, got a job, and was like, okay, I'm just gonna like rehab, work, and then hopefully I can get back on the court. So it took me about like 9 months to fully recover. And then, I started I got connected with a guy that I knew from junior tennis who was running his own tennis academy in Charlotte. And he was like, we need a woman to coach, like, it's all men and we need some representation. And then you're a Black woman as well. Like, in exchange for that, like, you can train. And I was like, awesome. And so that's what I did. And so thankful for him, Calvin Davis, like, he allowed me to train, get back into the sport, and then also like go play on the tour, which was my dream anyway.
Wow, that's awesome. Now, which did you enjoy more, playing or coaching?
Oh my gosh, coaching was amazing, because I feel like even as in my professional life, I've carried that through. Like, I'm a coach and I'm somebody who's gonna like get in the trenches with you. but I cannot control anything as a coach. And so it would drive me nuts. So I think I enjoyed playing more because I could control it. As a coach, nervous, like shaking, I'd be stressed out. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I totally understand what my parents were going through. But to be able to impact, be such an impact on the kids as a coach, because I actually understood what they were going through more mentally than anything. That is what meant the most to me. And so I'll always like cherish those times. And I did it for quite a long time after I finished playing.
When you finished playing, now what was next? What was after the game for Ashlee? What did you move into? And then did you feel that your Wake Forest experience on the court, in the classroom, helped to prepare you for that next phase in life?
Yeah. So it was like no choice of my own to quit playing. I got injured again. So I had 2 prior knee surgeries before I went to college.
Oh, wow.
Which was part of my journey of like, I would have knee surgeries and then people would be like, oh, she's not going to be able to like win another championship, or she's probably done with tennis. And that I would overcome that every single time. And so that was another reason why my career, was so special, and like excelling at Wake. Getting there and then excelling was really special for me. But a year after I started playing and traveling again, I was training and then I tweaked my knee and like could not walk. Like, and I knew it was like the worst this time because I was unable to walk. I couldn't bend my knee. It was really tough. And I knew that was like a sign from God that was like, it's probably time for you to hang up. Because at this point, I've had 2 knee surgeries, a rotator cuff surgery, and I knew I was going to have another surgery. So that was really depressing for me. I was trying to like understand who I had only known myself as Ashlee, the tennis player, and everyone knew me as Ashlee, the tennis player. So really depressing time, really trying to figure out my purpose and like my identity. I think every athlete goes through that when you transition. It's like the death of like who you've been your whole life.
Nobody cares. Nobody cares how how Superman feels when he's Clark Kent. And we're all afraid of being Clark Kent when you've been Superman for so long.
Right. Yeah. It was really tough. That's one of those transitional pivotal points in my life where I was like I was depressed. I mean, I really was. And so God just really works in mysterious ways. A family friend who's like my brother was friends with a guy who was a CEO of a nursing home company in Indiana. And he was like, hey, we're looking for some new, fresh people to run our nursing homes. Do you know anyone? And he was like, oh yeah, like my sister, like I think she could do it. And he called me and he's like, do you want to run nursing homes? I'm like, no, like who's running a nursing home? First of all, no. I was like, that is not cute. But I knew somebody who was doing it and I talked to them, got a little bit of information. And then I understood like how much money nursing home operators can make. And I was like, okay, I'm broke. Like I ain't got nothing else going on. I'm depressed. Like what could I lose? And so I didn't understand at the time how hard it is to actually get into what they call administrator and training programs. I just had this connection, which is the power of networking and knowing people. Interviewed for the job. The COO flew down, interviewed me, hired me on the spot. And like 90 days, not even 90, I think it was like 45 days later, I was like moving back to Indianapolis, and that jump started my real career.
That's awesome. If you had to share some advice for a young student athlete, doesn't matter what sport, and they were considering going to Wake Forest, what would you share with them, to any advice or insight to be successful while competing at Wake Forest?
Oh my gosh, there's so many pieces of advice. One thing I would say is to find someone at Wake Forest who like wants you to succeed, basically like a sponsor. And that's what Dwight was for me. And that's also what, oh my gosh. She was a teacher. Miss Hopkins.
Oh, yes.
Miss Hopkins
Beth
was
Hopkins.
that for me as well.
Yes. There are a lot of people. If Beth Hopkins could just get a copy of every degree that she helped earn, then yeah, she would have a lot of other degrees. Her name keeps coming up as being someone who's very vital in helping, as a resource in helping students.
She was her and her husband and her daughter and David, who I still talk to this day, love them to death. Like my second family away from home, she would cook meals for us. It's like we would go over and have dinner, and like you need that as a young person who's still trying to figure out who they are transitioning to school. So if you can find those people, definitely do that. The other thing I would say is advocate for yourself. I know a lot of times there's so many people around you that are telling you what you should do, trainers, coaches, academic advisors. And with the direction of and help of like people around me, aka Divide, like I learned I had to advocate for myself. I cannot take 16 hours and travel on the road. Like taking summer school is the best thing for me to do. I missed like one match in my whole career because my knee was hurting. And I remember I felt like I was pressured into playing, and like, it was like, no, advocate for yourself. Like, you know that you cannot play or you should not play today. So just trust your body, listen to yourself. And then the other thing lastly is like, you did not get there by chance. Like we are high achievers, right? But trust that whatever is happening, like that is just part of your journey. You are not a failure. You are, everything's going to be okay.
This is awesome. Ashlee, again, thank you so much for taking the time out to share your journey and your story with Deacon Nation. We've got one last thing I want to touch on. So the last time you and I saw each other, you were back on campus celebrating, Wake was celebrating 50 years of women's intercollegiate athletics. And you were on a panel and you were talking about your experience. What was it like coming back and being a part of celebrating women's athletics at Wake Forest?
In honor, something I didn't even know I needed at the time. It was amazing. I mean, I hadn't been back on Wake's campus in I think this is maybe 2015, 16. And so for one thing, to see the changes and the upgrades was just phenomenal. Like these kids, I'm like, these kids don't know how much they got it made. Like they got it made. I had it made when I was there, but then also to connect with people that I had not seen, to connect with you was amazing. But just to be able to share my experience with the current women student athletes there, Kevin, was like, it did something to my heart, because I understand exactly what they're going through. And I'm not so far removed that I still can't relate to them. So to be able to share my journey in an authentic way, I'm very open about mental health, and like my journey through that and how that impacted me in college when I didn't even know it was a thing back then. I just remember all of these experiences of like thinking every failure was like a life failure, or like every obstacle, like, you know, people are going to think I'm not smart or I'm not capable. And that's just not the case. And, you know, Wake Forest has really, my experience at Wake paved the way for my success in my career to this day. I feel like I can do anything. I feel like I can overcome anything, and that, enjoy it for what it is, enjoy the journey, and like, you know, understand that this is a once in a lifetime experience that's going to propel you and prepare you for the rest of your journey and whatever you do in life.
That's awesome. Ashlee, again, thank you so much for taking the time out to share your journey and your story with Deacon Nation.
Thank you. It was so nice. Thank you for having me. This was amazing, Kevin. I appreciate it.